You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 153. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello everybody and welcome back to the podcast. So happy you are joining me here. Before I get going, I just wanted to make a tiny announcement. I decided only yesterday actually that I am going to do, as they say, Black Friday this year. I wasn't going to, but then yesterday I was prompted I was on a walk. We were actually on our way to go and play mini golf. It was a nice sunny afternoon and it's a Sunday, and so not many of the shops are open. And there was a shop that was open and I managed to snag this wonderful jacket in there, something actually I had my eye on for a while. And the shop was doing a one-day only sale. Basically, I think they were actually closing down. So it was pure happenstance that I was in the right place at the right time, got the jacket that I wanted. So it was something I had already been thinking about getting, and I got a bit of a deal on it. I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, but it was a deal. And it gave me such a nice feeling. I really liked the feeling over and above actually the acquisition of the jacket, that I thought, you know what, I want to give a deal, to offer people a deal at the same time of creating the result that they want in life. Right? So if you're listening to this and you want to change your relationship with alcohol, whether you just want to take a break or drink a bit less or only drink at the weekends or whatever it is, I mean, there's a whole combination of things here that I can help you get that result, and at the same time you can get a bit of cash off. What's not to like about that, as they would say. Now, I'm going to do this, as I say, and I'm just still working the details out, but I have decided I'm going to do this in strictly limited quantities. Again, this was influenced by yesterday. Didn't want to go mad and buy all the things. It was the jacket, and so and by focusing on that, on the thing I wanted or the result I wanted, the experience was wonderful. So I'm going to do this in strictly limited quantities. It's going to be first come, first served, and I want to reward loyalty. So I'm going to make these offers first to my email list. I'm going to give my list a day or two to decide if they want to snag one of the deals before I put them on social media. So if you know you want to coach with me, if you know you want freedom around alcohol, even if you're scared and even if you're worried it won't work, and even if all those other things, you're going to want to get on my email list. That is the first small, tiny step that will be getting you on your way to the result you want. And by the way, if you do it now, it just so happens at this time of year that if you decide to follow your desires and go forward and say, yep, Anna, I want to work with you, you will get a bit of a deal. What could be better than that? Now, the easiest way of getting on my list is to go to 90dayslater.co/list. Couldn't be simpler. You give me your email, you're on my list, then you get the announcements as soon as they get made. All right, with all that being said, I want to, in this episode, talk about reimagining celebrations, and one where alcohol is not the central ingredient unless you decide to make it that way. I am doing this episode now in early November in order to plant the seed in your minds to have a different holiday season, a different Christmas season in 2024 when it comes to alcohol. I know it can take a while to warm ourselves up to the thought of different things, right? We sort of play with the idea of what could that new reality be like. We often, not all of us, don't jump straight into this. So I want to start planting the seed here in early November ahead of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year, to really encourage you to start playing with the idea and thinking about the idea of how differently those experiences, those celebrations will be if alcohol plays less of a central starring role. Because really, what do you think of when you hear the pop of a champagne cork? In fact, that came up in a coaching call the other day with a client. Said, when I hear that, it's kind of like, ooh, celebration, right? Ooh, time to have fun. For you, it might bring up memories of New Year's Eve, for instance, or maybe a wedding toast. Maybe you just got married, just you went to a wedding, right? It just feels like a celebration. And I want to look at this from the perspective of we often tie certain drinks to certain celebrations. Now, champagne, at least from my neck of the wood and my background, was kind of like that will work in every situation. Drop a champagne, anoint something as being a special moment. But I really want to think about, why do we believe a glass in our hand creates that, right? What is it that creates that situation? So I want to dive into a fresh way of thinking about celebration where, as I said, one where alcohol isn't the centerpiece unless you want it to be, which you can choose. But it's very different to you choosing that versus you kind of just going along with the script that everybody else has been told. Because many of us don't realize how much societal norms really have influenced our view of celebrations, particularly around drinking. We're smart, educated people. We're highly functioning, high achievers. And yet it seems that it's not just we need to have champagne, but I certainly went from Veuve Clicquot, I loved, was probably my favorite go-to, but then I discovered Dom Perignon. It's like, okay, so when I got a promotion, I remember it had to be Dom Perignon. Veuve Clicquot wasn't good enough all of a sudden, because Dom Perignon seemed more of a celebratory thing, right? And so we have these different ways that we think, but they're just still carbonated wine, basically. It's fizzy wine in a particular type of bottle. So when we imagine celebration, what I found was that alcohol feels like it's supposed to be there. But that's largely because it's what we've been taught to think. It really doesn't have to be that way. And I know you know this, but knowing this logically versus how we feel about it can be a big distinction. So that's what we're going to explore. So first I want to share a little bit of my background on this. Like many of you, for many, many, many years, I really didn't think twice about a drink at a celebration. In fact, I may have mentioned this on the podcast before, I used to keep a bottle of champagne in the fridge at all times, ready to celebrate. The tiniest thing to celebrate. I clearly remember my son getting offered a spot at university, and I said, right, that's it. The champagne was open. Now, this was a conditional offer. Now, of course, that was important. It was nice to celebrate, but he hadn't got in. He hadn't done the work yet. He hadn't got the grades. He hadn't done the exams yet. We were still many, many steps from actually the result he wanted, because the result he wanted was to study at that place. But I decided just getting the offer was enough to crack open a whole bottle of champagne. So that was my starting point, right? It's very different to where I am now. But what started to happen was that over time I began to question why that drink felt essential. Right? And that was it. It felt essential. It wasn't just a nice to have. It was like, we got to have champagne. So I've got to be ready. Because you drink champagne cold, it's got to be cold. I have to rush out to the shop. It might not be cold, and the shop might not be open. So it's got to be in the fridge, right? Can you think it was, to me, it was essential. I started to ask, was it the drink itself, or was it the moment? Was it the people? Was it the feeling of joy and that togetherness? And the more I explored this, the more I realized that celebrations could be just as meaningful and, in fact, more memorable without alcohol. So back to that time with my son, it was it was a point to celebrate. But it would have been just as special just to sit there with him and say, hey, look at that. That's step one done. There's still these other steps to go, but let's sit and pause and reflect on what you've achieved. So getting to the stage where I could realize that celebrations can be just as meaningful and even more memorable, like I say, without alcohol, that creates for me, in me, a sense of freedom and power. The power to choose how I'm going to celebrate, the power to choose how I'm going to feel, and the freedom to do what really is what I want to do. And that is something to celebrate, right? This choice, this sense of choice and freedom. Frankly, that I'm not being a sheep. I'm not calling you sheep, but I do sit back and think, my gosh, Anna, you were such a sheep. You just went along with what all the drinks companies and the advertisers and basically, frankly, what everyone else was doing. You weren't setting out your own stall on this, because I didn't spend any time thinking about it. It was just, this is what we do. We have champagne for a celebration. So I want to talk about that today. So let's first talk about the power of these societal norms and explore what they are. Now, norms are unwritten rules that guide our behavior, right? They tell us what's normal. How about that for a loaded word when it comes to drinking? And societal norms tell us what's expected in various situations, right? So this is what's normal. So basically, if you don't do these things, you are not normal. I mean, that's the other side to the coin. And when it comes to celebrations, society has built the idea that certain events require specific drinks to mark the occasion. Yes, we get really specific. As I say, champagne, I think, is a catch-all, and Prosecco may be under that as well. But just take that a step deeper. Mulled wine in winter, especially on the run-up to Christmas. I mean, mulled wine in January, don't see it quite as much. But when it comes into mid-November through to, New Year's Eve, you'll see mulled wine everywhere. A cold beer on a summer's day, a cold beer with pizza, red wine with steak. Now, I know there are going to be many of you out there screaming at me, saying, yes, but Anna, red wine with steak does go so well. That is the way to celebrate that meal. But these are all just built up associations. These drinks have become symbols of celebration. And not just that, they've become symbols of what we've all kind of collectively agreed on, even if we weren't aware we were doing that, rather than it being something that's naturally meaningful. And they become ingrained in our culture. I was talking with one of my lovely clients last week about this, and I was talking earlier about mulled wine, right? We're beginning the run up to Christmas. And, mulled wine in the UK is starting to appear everywhere. Now, I lived in Germany many moons ago, and there you had Glühwein, and that was kind of like the real deal. That was, in my mind, where it all kind of started. Back in the day, in the UK, we didn't really have so much in the way of mulled wine. So it's because, in my view, and, this is not about, you can write in and tell me I'm wrong, but in my view, it's become a bit of an imported tradition. And my experience of mulled wine, even when I was kind of with my drinking hat on, it was usually fairly horrid, quite sweet, quite sickly, and super expensive. Right? We are sold the story. If you're at a Christmas market, it's better to do it with a glass of mulled wine. But actually, do you know what I experienced? I found that for me, the joy is in having the hotness of the drink. The drink in the glass with the steam kind of, for me, was bringing up Christmassy vibes. And do you know what? A lovely cup of tea does that just as well. In fact, any cup of tea does that just as well. What happens is when we get into groups, we feel this even more intensely. So if we're all having individually these thoughts that glass of champagne is going to make this better, a mulled wine is something that makes an experience Christmassy. And if everyone else around us, or most people around us, are telling us that, we're going to feel it even more deeply. Which brings us to groupthink. That's kind of sense of pressure, and it really is pressure that we feel to follow what everyone else is doing. So I want you to think about this when we get into celebrations and alcohol. We kind of have, it's not just peer pressure, it's really an underlying feeling. It's a more of a feeling that this is what people do at a celebration. This is what we just do. But here is the good news. Just because others are following this norm, it doesn't mean you have to. And I know you know that. But if you feel you need permission to act on that, I'm giving you that permission today. I want you to imagine instead that you are creating a new norm that fits your specific life better, you. And if that is still a stretch, you think, well, I still actually do prefer champagne at celebrations, Anna. If I'm honest with you, I want you to think about a new norm that works for the person you're becoming and the person you want to be. How would they view the ubiquity of champagne at a celebration? And how would they act in response to that? Because here's something else to bear in mind. Celebrations actually vary greatly around the world. Beer is big in some countries, wine in others, and tea also is often popular. This shows us that there is no single way to celebrate. You just think there is because that's what you are familiar with and that's what you're surrounded in. It's a bit of an echo chamber. In fact, alcohol-free celebrations are common in many cultures. So that is about enough, if nothing else, That is a reminder that we all have options to create our own personal meaning behind these, right? We do not have to follow the crowd because the crowd is just what we happen to see within our specific life. And if you think, oh, that sounds really hard, and that's, really difficult because this is what I know, I want you to think about other areas in your life where you do this quite naturally. We're talking about celebrations, and we'll talk about Christmas. I know certainly my experience was when I got married. My husband and I got married. We created a new family at that point. We were bringing into the marriage we have different traditions. We had, my family, we had this thing about the woolen stocking on the bed on Christmas Eve, and my husband, they had a pillowcase of toys by the tree. Right? Simple situation. And at that point, we had to sort of decide, so which way are we going to go? Are we going to create something new? Even though I had only known this one way, he had only known this one way, we had this conversation and it happened. And in fact, what happened was a lot of the time, things just morphed. But we still had to be a little bit intentional about it. And what makes a celebration special is when we infuse them with meaning. And we have personal rituals and thoughts about it, because we attach emotions and values to them. And by the way, you know this from the other side, right? You can flip the script. Go think of a time when you've been at a quote-unquote celebration at a wedding, maybe for somebody you didn't know very well, maybe even a family member that you kind of felt, I've got to go to this. It's kind of expected. I don't really want to go. Don't have much in common with them. And your experience of that celebration would be totally different to one where you were close to the couple and you really joyously wanted to be there. And yet, maybe in both situations, there would have been champagne, right? So it's not the drink that creates the celebration. It's how you think about it and what it means to you and the meaning you put into it. So I'd love for you to take a moment to really reflect on this. I mean, really sit and think about this. Take it outside of the domain of alcohol if it helps. Think about a tradition in your family or your circle. Is there a particular ritual or something you do that holds special meaning? And then ask, why is that? What is it that creates that special thing? Maybe, and now layer in one of these situations where there is drink involved. And then ask, is it because of the drink itself or because of the people and the memories associated with it? Or you pregnant ladies out there, or if you've had children, we generally just go easy to go just not drinking when we're pregnant. Did you enjoy those Christmases less because you weren't drinking? Probably not. Because you were in your mind, that was how you were going to celebrate, right? You kind of taken alcohol out of the equation, and I am offering you can do that intentionally without having to have a child, put it that way. So really just start asking yourself these questions. What creates celebration? What creates a feeling? What creates that sense of joy? Because once you start asking these questions, you realize that you do and you can decide which parts of a celebration actually matter and which you want to keep going with. Now let's talk about the programming of celebration. They sell us the idea that celebration isn't possible without the alcohol. These ads and cultural images have shaped our perceptions, right, to the point where we may not even question it. Think about the time we went to the pictures, it was about probably 6-7 years ago now, and there was a particular brandy producer was sponsoring the film. No, I hadn't heard of such a thing either. And they were giving out free glasses of brandy to watch the film. And I remember saying, I actually don't like brandy, saying I really didn't want one. And it was kind of like, but it's free. That's what they were saying. But free, why don't you? You know, this producer is offering this. And it wasn't that they were pushing it, but it was more that I was viewed as like the oddball to say no to it. So it's a place where you can start questioning the norm. And you can pause here and think, when you think about a special occasion, do you feel an automatic pull to have a drink? Do you want that? Or is it just because of what you've been taught? This choice is powerful. I believe that celebration is all about intention. You can still raise a glass, but the choice is yours. Alcohol can be part of your celebration, but it does not have to be. And that small shift, there's one thing you leave this podcast with, just that small shift that you could go without the glass of champagne or whatever's on offer, that can be liberating. I want you to see that as a change, right? That's a change and out and into a much more mindful drinking way of being. So when it comes to redefining celebration, let's imagine a new kind of celebration. And I really wanted to take you to a place where you can think about a glass of sparkling water, maybe with some lemon in it, or maybe just in a beautiful glass. That for me does it. If I have a glass of sparkling water in a wine, if I have sparkling water in a wine glass, it feels fantastic. I was talking with another client the other day about this, and she said how much she loves San Pellegrino. I am not paid by San Pellegrino, although it does happen to be my favourite brand of sparkling mineral water. She said that feels like such a treat, but she doesn't buy it because it's more expensive than, just the sort of the bog standard water. And then we looked at that and said, well, if that feels like a treat, isn't that the sense of celebration? So instead of drinking a glass of alcohol, if that's not what you want, go for something that feels like a treat. And that in itself creates a sense of celebration. Or you could go a completely different route. A hot cup of tea, right? It can be a marker of a special occasion if that's how you choose it to be. Last week, we went to a swanky bar with some old friends haven't seen for months. And I had a cup of tea. In fact, I had a pot of tea. It was delightful. They served it in the pot. I had the separate milk. I had the tea strainer. And it was like, all the gubbins and all the bits. And it was lovely. And I didn't miss the fact that I wasn't having wine. And by the way, it was a really cold evening. And what I was seeking for me that felt good was something hot. I suffer a lot from the cold. So to drink a hot drink was wonderful. But it was a cup of tea. Right? It's the sort of thing you drink at 8 o'clock in the morning too. So really, again, celebration is about creating atmosphere. It's more than a drink. It's an experience. And what if instead of focusing on the drink, you focused on creating an atmosphere? You focused on the celebration where the joy is in the experience, not in the glass in your hand. It's about the people. It's about the decorations. It's about where you're with. It's about maybe that sense of anticipation. As we go in later into November, I know I'm going to have that build-up of a sense of anticipation about Christmas. I love the run up to Christmas, always have. That for me feels like a celebration, and I can do that certainly without a glass in my hand. So if you're ready to try something new, here are a few practical tips. A simple thing to do is next time you celebrate or going to a party, bring a non-alcoholic option. Don't rely on somebody else having it. So, they might just have the orange juice and the water. Get something that you really want to have or you want to try and see how that feels. That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can just try it very intentionally to decide you want to experiment with not giving any focus on the booze, and then just watch your mind. See how much you do that. You might want to decide how, I said earlier, I like to have water in a wine glass. Play around with the glasses that you're given. Maybe you want to have, cranberry juice in a champagne flute. Why not? Why not? Find out what works for you. That's really a great tip. And you do that by experimenting. Now, I can be a little bit bloody-minded. I think like many others, I don't like being told what to do. So when I started to buck the trend and drink less, I found I was kind of like showing the alcohol companies, I don't need to follow what you're telling me to do just because you want my money. So another huge benefit that comes from this, and is from the that you can celebrate, and actually I do celebrate, is that the cost of going out to dinner is far cheaper. Our restaurant bills have, if not halved, then they've dropped way down, which means we go out to eat more often. Right? Another tip is I want you to imagine the event you're going to and have an exit strategy so you are not stuck there. There is a big difference between, I always encourage and coach people on not avoiding alcohol because it's everywhere, we can't avoid it. But there's a difference between not avoiding it and making it really hard on yourself. So if you're invited to a party or a celebration or something, figure out how you're going to leave, decide how long you're going to stay. There's a big difference staying somewhere for 90 minutes and 6 hours. Make sure you do not feel trapped with all the people doing all the drinking. Decide ahead of time. A lot of people I speak with are really worried about what other people will think and what other people will say. Even though with them we say, look, I really know I shouldn't worry about this, but I really secretly do. So all I say that is just be ready with a response, kind of like a little statement, like a press statement. It need only be 6 words if that's what you want, and that's just what you say. And you just repeat it. People get fed up and bored of asking, and if they don't, are they your people? Do you really care? Probably not. So let's take a quick moment to recap. Celebrations are deeply personal. You really don't need to follow society's norms to feel joy or to mark a special occasion. And by redefining celebration in a way that feels right for you, you're going to be honouring your values and creating something meaningful, not just for you today, but for who you want to become, for your future life. I want you to feel empowered and take pride in your choices. You really have the power to create celebrations that are unique to you and filled with intention. You could play around with it. So it's Tuesday. You could decide, I'm going to celebrate tonight. I'm going to celebrate Tuesday. Celebrate something that happened to you today, and how do you want to celebrate it, and create that sense of celebration in you. And then question, so would I need a glass of champagne to make this feel like a great Tuesday celebration? Okay, that's what I have for this week. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. It helps more people find this message, and they can start their own journey, as you might say, towards mindful celebration. And finally, I love to hear from you. Reach out and share your experiences. You can reach me on anna@90dayslater.co. Otherwise, I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around, and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.